I want to show you guys how to resize the height and then the width of an element using CSS in this particular video. And we're also going to dive into use something like max width, because using something like width just alone may render some of our web pages unresponsive. So it may introduce something like a horizontal roller bar most of the time. So we're going to use something like max width to get rid of that as we move along. But we'll have to just first of all deal with the height and then the width first of all. So let's go ahead and then see how that is actually done. So to work with CSS height and width, we're just basically referring to the height and then the width of an element. So what I want to do right now, I do have a file that is actually called index.html right here, and that is actually found in this particular location right here. So I want to show you is in this particular folder called CSS height and width, and you can just go ahead and then create your own folder. Even if you don't want to call it something like CSS height and width, you can call it anything you like. So if I double click on this, it opens up and there is nothing inside of it. So what I want to do right here is, first of all, let me throw in my HTML boilerplate. So I do have a meet. If I do exclamation and then hit tab, it's going to generate this for me, and you can just say CSS height and width like that. So we're going to use that as the title right here. And again, we're going to also deal with something called a max width as we'll move along anyway. But the first thing I want to just basically do is that let's just go ahead and then create something like a div in here, which I'm going to just basically give that a class, and I'm going to just use that class to basically start that. All right, so let's go ahead and then put give this a class. We'll just basically call that box, and we can just basically close that out, maybe right here, even if we don't even mind. So we do have this right here, so we don't have anything in here, but if we want to have a text, we can just do something like CSS, can just say height and width or whatever we want to say. All right, just to basically take a look at that on the browser. So if we go back to the browser right here and I will refresh, you're going to see that we do have this particular div right here, and then we do have CSS height and width inside of it. So what I want to do is really very simple. To experiment with height and width, we're going to just first of all, let's create something like a style tag right here, and you can just create something like an external CSS for this if you want to do that. But I'm going to just basically use an inline CSS right here, or internal CSS. So this is going to be style, and then within here, the first thing I want to basically do right here is to reference to this box right here. So I want to copy this, and this is just basically a class. So if I do dots and I go ahead and just call that box, and I can go ahead and do whatever that I basically want to do in here. So for instance, I want to give that a background. So this is going to be background, and let's say this is going to be called as something like navy. You can use something like background dash color if you want to do that. That's just fine. It's just basically going to work whichever one you use. I'm going to just stop with background right here. And if we save the changes, I want to take a look at that on our browser right here. If we refresh, you see that we do have a blue background right here. All right. But now, if you take a look at that, you see that we do have a default width and then height right here. Which is just basically the default width and then height that most elements actually come with. But what if we want it in such a way that we should be able to control the width and the height of that particular element? So we can do that. For the first thing I want to do is to just control the height right here. So to control the height, let me say that we're going to just basically make the height to be something like 100 pixels right here. And that reminds me that you see that we're setting this to 100 pixels right here, but we do have other units that you can use, something like cm. So if you want to use something like cm, you can do that. We can also use something like even percentage. All right, so if you want to set that in percentage, you can also set that. All right, but let's just experiment with this for now. So if you save that and I want to take a look at that from our browser, and then we'll refresh in here, you see that the height of the element kind of increases, and at the same time we can also work on the width of the element. All right, so if you want to do that, it's really very simple. So let's do that right here, and I'm going to just do width right here, and let's say we're basically going to set it to something like 400 pixels. Remember, you can use other units. If you don't want to use pixel, you can use something like cm or whatever you want to use. So let's check that out. You see that the width of the element is kind of reduced right here. You see how I just basically working with that. And of course, if you want to work with the text inside of it, or you can just completely, maybe you want to get rid of that, that's just fine. But what I want to do right here is maybe I'll just change the color of the text right here, and let's just call that, let's give that a color of white. Save the changes, and we can also align the elements. So let's say text align, and maybe we'll set it to the center of the web page, save the changes, and then we'll go to our browser and then we'll refresh. You see that we do have the text in there. All right. Now one thing that I did want you guys to kind of know is that the width and then the height of an element, the way that it is right here with the CSS properties, this one is naturally responsive. Because if I increase the width, but let's say in the situation where maybe we want to increase the width of this particular thing to something like 7,000, like that. And then if we get into the browser right here and I refresh, you see that that kind of increase a lot. And then if you take a look at down here on the bar right here, I mean at the bottom of this browser, you're going to see that we do have something like a horizontal roller bar right here. All right. And in the modern day of web design, we always frown our face against having a horizontal roller bar like this. All right. And this is going to introduce us to something that is actually called a max width. So we're going to use max width to get rid of this. So these days we can actually use max width instead of using something like width straight the way that we used it right here. So instead of just calling that word, we just call that, we can just get in here and just say something like max width, and if we set it to the same value. So with this max width right here, this is just basically going to help the browser be able to handle the horizontal roller bar for us in case this particular page is actually viewed with a really small browser. It's going to just basically take a look at that and then resize it for us. So if we go back to our browser right here, and if we refresh, I want you to keep your eyes on this horizontal roller bar. So if we refresh in here, you see that that particular horizontal roller bar is actually gone. All right, so it's helped you to just check and then find out how much space is actually available on this particular browser, and then it resizes it to just match that particular exact screen that you use in viewing that particular page at that particular point in time. All right. So instead of just adding something like horizontal roller bar right here, which we all frown against if we are using something like a phone to view the page, all right? So this is just basically how that of the width and height of a web page is actually dealt with, all right? So I just basically want to do that. I know it's something that is really very simple to do, but I just have a lot of time today. I'm not doing anything, and I figured out that if I show you guys how this works, it won't be something bad at all. So if you like that, just feel free to give the video a like. And if you have any questions, you can put the question in the comment section below. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye for now.